In the previous YouTube content, entitled Dissecting the Feud Between the Serpent's Offspring and Jesus Christ, you can recognize the personality traits of the dark triad that are opposite to the personality of Jesus Christ. The personality traits that are opposite to the personality of Jesus Christ can be categorized as the personality traits of the Antichrist. In psychology, the dark triad is the most evil personality. However, the Antichrist feels that he is better and more righteous than Christ. The dark triad consists of NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, or a combination of the three. However, since there is so much talk on social media about narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, in Indonesia, it can be concluded that there are many victims of narcissistic personality disorder who need help, as well as prevention. Therefore, in this video, I am prioritizing narcissistic individuals because they are going viral, while Machiavellianism and psychopathy will follow. Another reason I am prioritizing narcissistic personalities is because I am an empath who is a narcissistic person victimized. I learned from social media to understand the characteristics of narcissistic personalities, then did counseling for mental recovery, and now I can share it with you. Why do narcissistic people often look good to people? A narcissistic person is usually charming, clever, confident, and sociable as ever. This is because the narcissistic person is good at building a self-image and doing it manipulatively. So the first main characteristic of narcissism is good at manipulating, done for self-interest. Any event he can manipulate, he is adept at twisting facts or circumstances. His skill in manipulating is of course followed by lies, and this he does to satisfy his big ego. He needs self-esteem and satisfies his interests. The second main characteristic is to feel great, the best and the most righteous, which is also his pride. Therefore it is difficult to realize if he makes a mistake and even impossible to cure. A narcissistic person needs praise. If it is not him who is praised but someone else or even his competitors, then the narcissistic person will be offended, because his great pride is disturbed. He will be angry, so that people who sincerely praise others will be able to be dropped or damaged by their name. This is deliberately done in return for his heartache. Even though a person praises others for what they are without any tendency. Imagine if you were a victim of this kind of crime, you'd be confused, right? And if it continues, it will definitely be stressful. Slander is part of his skill in manipulation. If you are a victim of a narcissistic person and it is ongoing, you will be stressed. If the narcissistic person is close to you or meets you every day, and you are the victim, then every day you will receive various kinds of toxic continuously and will result in mental disorders due to serious trauma. Another similar example is when a narcissistic person makes a common mistake, as a relative or family trying to tell him for his good, but his reaction will be surprising, because your good intentions will be considered as disturbing his superiority that is the best and right. He will get angry. His anger may be expressionless, but then retaliate with actions that make you suffer mentally. Such as defamation, or slander. It can also be spontaneously with emotion to say sharp and hurtful words. Then the third main characteristic is almost no empathy, because the empathy that the narcissist has is manipulative, not out of compassion, but for self-interest or ego satisfaction. In addition to these characteristics, a narcissistic person likes to control others, especially those close to him. So he will include them in his world, namely the narcissistic playground, so that it is easy to control and bind to his interests. This is dangerous for those who are controlled and bound because it can infect narcissistic attitudes or damage them mentally. So it often happens that his family will be kept away from his partner's family, which he cannot fully control, and at the same time can abuse his partner, if his partner is his supply or his victim. A narcissistic person usually has a cycle of actions towards their victims, but this is not always the case. This repeating cycle towards his victim has 3 phases. The first phase is love bombing or idealization. This phase occurs at the beginning of the relationship with the narcissistic person. People with NPD always see themselves as perfect, great, or superior. They will project an idealized image of themselves onto others who are targeted as their victims or suppliers. They will make the impression that they are a very attractive, intelligent, or high-achieving person. So in this phase, narcissistics will be very attractive to others because of their strong charm and high self-confidence. At the beginning of the relationship, the narcissist will do love bombing by giving abundant attention and love. Once the victim is ensnared, then enter the second phase. The second phase is devaluation or abuse or bullying of the victim. This can happen when the person with NPD feels that their partner or others no longer meet their expectations or do not give them the ego gratification, and do not get the respect that the narcissistic person needs. In this phase, they may demean and blame their victim, feeling disappointed or angry that their victim is no longer as good as they want them to be. This can lead to manipulative or punitive behavior, i.e., harassment, bullying, or mistreatment of their victim. Domestic violence is usually committed by husbands against wives, but I have seen domestic violence committed by wives against husbands, even to the point of bleeding, and the victims are unable to fight back. Usually, those who dare to try to fight NPD will end up even more bloody. The same thing can happen to couples who are dating. Most recently, I heard from a female psychology lecturer who as a teenager was oppressed and abused by her boyfriend, and did not dare to fight back for years in the grip and oppression of her narcissistic boyfriend. The third phase is rejection. There are 2 kinds of rejection. The first is abandonment and the second is silence. In this first phase of the model, the victim will be abandoned without any sign or conversation, completely cut off suddenly. If the victim tries to contact and ask questions, they will be silenced or even cursed. Before leaving the victim, the narcissist first spreads slander to all the victim's communities, including churches or religions, with tactics as if he is the victim, with a submissive and helpless attitude. This is deliberately done to influence the victim's communities, including the victim's family, so that they believe in the narcissistic slander drama scenario. What I experienced was being excluded from all church activities and alienated from relatives and family, because family and relatives were affected by the church's attitude of excluding me. The narcissist's goal was to destroy my mentality and life by uprooting me from the roots of my previous life. Usually, the narcissist does this because he already has a new replacement victim as a substitute supply. If this happens to a married couple, then the narcissist already has a mistress prepared as a replacement. The second possibility in this phase is that the narcissist does the silent treatment. The victim is not spoken to, just ignored, deliberately done as a punishment because the narcissist is angry, because the victim can no longer fulfill his ego. If the narcissistic person is a woman, she will be more demanding than the narcissistic man. Both of these narcissistic methods, abandonment or silence, are equally cruel and malicious. If you experience these kinds of actions, be aware that you may be in a relationship with a narcissistic person. Know that abandonment or silent treatment is never justified, so if you have done nothing wrong, do not feel guilty, because this feeling of guilt is what the narcissist wants to destroy your feelings and mentality, and if continued will damage your mentality. This silence can last for years. Another example of a spiritual narcissist crime that you may have heard about in the news is a crime by someone who is respected and has authority over their victim. For example, a spiritual teacher who molested his patient who was undergoing a private mental health program at a healing place. Another example is a pastor who molested an underage female congregation, and also happened to a female santry who was molested by her teacher while studying at an Islamic boarding school. You may have heard of these incidents. This is an example of a spiritual narcissistic crime because the person who molests is a person who has authority over his victim, and when she wants to fight back, the victim becomes afraid. Besides that, the community respects this narcissist, so the victim's testimony will backfire. Besides that, other students or santrawadi see the teacher as a good person. There is no problem. Only the victim knew of the teacher's cruelty and crime. So, the victim's position is cornered. In addition, as an individual who is respected and authoritative by his ingenuity, he can manipulate by holding his victim's subconscious mind hostage until he does not move, through advice or words that can enter the victim's subconscious, such as hypnotherapy techniques, so that the victim is completely helpless even though he has been abused many times over the years. This is truly a horrible crime. This kind of crime can cause the victim to want to end her life. In the previous video content titled Unconsciousness That Terrifying, I gave an example of the spiritual narcissist attitude of the Pharisees and scribes who cleverly manipulated the entire people of Israel into hating Jesus of Nazareth, even willing to kill Jesus. Even though Pilate tried to release the innocent Jesus, the people still shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." This is the same example as above. The religious leaders have hijacked the subconscious mind of the people of Israel. And the influence continues until now. So actually, Jesus Christ was a victim of both spiritual narcissism and malignant narcissism. Jesus was persecuted and suffered to death on the cross. This is the evil of the Antichrist in the form of a cunning and cruel narcissist. To the victims of narcissism, remember, you beloved, the Lord Jesus has said, "In the world, you suffer persecution, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." John 16:33b. God will give you His strength and grace to those who experience the evil of narcissism, because the same evil was experienced by Jesus Christ. The Jewish nation was a victim of the narcissistic one, and they experienced it repeatedly. As the chosen nation, they became the main target of the devil's attacks. First the victims of spiritual narcissist, by the scribes, then became victims of malignant narcissist, by Hitler in the Holocaust, and narcissistic victims of the church that harassed the Jewish people through the installation of Judenzo, Jewish pig, relief sculptures in European churches. Although it has been protested many times but still exists in Germany until now, namely in Lambert's Church, Münster, Stadtkirche St. Marien, Town Church of St. Mary, Wittenberg, and at St. Mary's Church, Marienkirche, Göttingen. Unhealed narcissistic victims will be severely traumatized, or may become narcissistic themselves. That's the evil of the Antichrist, who continues to insert his evil DNA into the human psyche. Only a few Jews changed and believed that Jesus was the Messiah, because their subconscious minds had been hijacked by the narcissist. Those who do believe, such as the Jews for Jesus and One for Israel groups, can be transformed by grace. The founder of the Jews for Jesus group in America in 1973, Ben Epstein, Benjamin, a business magnate, experienced restoration after a spiritual encounter with Jesus Christ. Similarly, the founder of One for Israel, in 2005, a clinical psychologist named Dr. Erez Soref, who by grace encountered Jesus and became a believer. Thus, both the narcissistic and the seriously traumatized victim are very difficult to heal unless they receive grace, encountering Jesus Christ, the Savior of all nations indiscriminately. In order for you to avoid narcissistic individuals, you need to recognize the characteristics of a narcissistic person as stated above. I want to emphasize here that if you experience ghosting or silent treatment by your friends, boyfriend, family, or spouse, don't be confused and feel guilty. It's the narcissist's tactic to make you feel guilty. As long as you have done nothing wrong, keep in mind that abandonment and silence are never justified. And this experience is a sign to be wary that you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person. Hopefully this video can be useful and you can avoid the threat of a narcissist. Don't forget to comment and subscribe if you are interested. And if anyone feels victimized and wants to ask questions or consultation, please contact me via email socamtody98@gmail.com, free. To increase your knowledge, here are attached 14 types of narcissistics that you need to be aware of, data obtained from Leah Lestari Journey, and can also see references.